So yes, hello everyone. So I'm Yasser Slami. I'm a software engineer working with the CTO team in Gaia-X, or the lab team. So today I'm gonna talk about ODRL. I put like our data rules, literally, just to make the title a bit interesting. But obviously it stands for Open Digital Rights Language. So we're gonna discuss it afterwards, and yeah. See if some other people come in. Starting slowly. Okay, then maybe we can start. So yeah, ODRL. It's there's a lot of systems that use a lot of vendor-specific systems to describe their access control or usage control. But it's of course the aim of Gaia-X is also interoperability, and that's why of course we aim for the open digital rights language. Like I said, because it's a global thing to describe access and user control in very detailed way. So yeah, you can see this very big, thin, scary, with a lot of things. So hopefully you're not already scared by the presentation, especially just right after lunch. So it's a bit difficult. Yeah, but basically it's just policies that describes kind of rules. So rules are permissions, duty, prohibitions. So what you can do, what you have to do, you must do, and what you can't do. And those things just apply. Okay, what can I do regarding an asset? And sometimes there's constraints. Okay, you can use this asset, for example, for this duration of time, or other kind of constraints, and an action. What kind of action can you do? So, for example, read, write, the most used ones. So yeah, we'll see examples afterwards. I think it'll be the best way to discuss it. So first in here, for example, you have a very simple policy with the permission. You have a permission here with the action use, and you have the target. I hope it's very readable. I guess for the IT guys, the JSONs are really familiar. So for me, I think that's the most very familiar way to describe something. So you can see, for example, that the target here, the asset 456, and the action is use, and we have an assigner. So the assigner here in Gaia-X, for example, is the provider. We have always the data provider and the consumer. So in this case, it's the provider who sets the policies. And you have a much simpler kind of model than the one we've seen before. So you have, for example, parties, which are either the assignee or assigner. So here, for example, the assigner is the one who assigns the policy, and the assignee who's the one which the policy applies to. And we have assets, of course, which are targeted by the policy and the actions. And we can have many rules in a policy, of course. So next, completely unrelated, but we'll see afterwards a bit. It's verifiable credentials. I think we already talked about them enough. You've seen them in the last presentations by Evan and the team. So yeah, verifiable credentials here are cryptographically signed by the issuer, and it's a way to be able to check data and have a more trust and tamper-proof way to share claims and to verify claims. So yeah, of course, they're used in Gaia-X, obviously to represent pretty much everything that was described in the ontology by our colleague Vincent. So yeah, it can be any kind of form of credential, and you can see here the model that you can have an issuer, verifier, and holder. Maybe not go too much into detail already. I think talked about them enough. But of course, if you have any questions available afterwards or after just the presentation, feel free to ask any details. Yeah, just here again another example, another JSON. I'm so sorry for people who don't like JSONs. They're going to be everywhere in this presentation. So yeah, here for example we have just a verifiable credential on the VAT. So the one, for example, if you've seen Vincent's presentation from yesterday, the one you've seen the legal registration number of a company here, for example, with the VAT ID. This one I think of the Gaia-X. And yeah, just a quick mention that now for LoRa we are using the GWT. But again, it was went much more into detail, for example, with the Evan's presentation. And if you're interested in more detail, I think that's the way to go. So yeah, so now what's the actual link with the ODRL? So ODRL, like you said, so Open Digital Rights Language again, is a policy expression language that provides a flexible, interoperable information model to represent statements about the usage of data and services. But there's no easy way to verify and assess claims directly in this policy that we're talking about. So the idea is why not use verifiable credentials directly inside ODRL policy without the need of any kind of mapping or any kind of system in between. So that's why we created the ODRL profile. So ODRL VC profile that of course is compatible with the base model of ODRL information model. It will of course rely on already what's existing on the ODRL specification, the verifiable credential specification, and the JSON path, like you're gonna see afterwards in an example. So it doesn't define any kind of a new specification. It's just trying to reuse already what's already existing. So it's just the main goal is just to give a very clear syntax and a very clear definition to express policies in a very understandable way, to be as interoperable as possible, and to be able to leverage the power of the verifiable credentials. So we can just here define a couple of attributes, for example, the left operand and the credential subject type. But again, it'll be, I think, more clear with the example. So here I try to take another example, so outside of Gaia-X, because there's actually nothing that stops you from, in this ODRL profile, to reuse any kind of verifiable credential. Doesn't need to be necessarily, of course, Gaia-X credentials. So here I took the driver license example from ISO, and you can see here a bit more complex ODRL policy in which you have a permission with an asset here, for example, 456, and the action is the use. The assigner is the provider, and the assignee, so the one who for which the policy applies to, must have. So there's two constraints. So you need to have these kind of two left operands. So the left operand is what we want to evaluate in the actual verifiable credentials, is the attribute. If some people maybe are familiar with the attribute-based access control, it's a bit similar because we are based on the attributes from the verifiable credentials. So here, for example, is the category code of the driver license. For people probably aware that there are like categories. For example, if you have a driver license for a bike or for a car or for a truck, they are of course different. So here, for example, you need to have the category C, as you can see in the right operand here, C, and the operator is equal. So that category must be equal to C. And the type of the credential must be this type from the driver license, from this specification. And then you can see the source right there at the bottom. And also the second constraint also that applies is that the expiry date of the driver license must be less than, so for example here 2025. So it must be at least, it must expire like at least in the 2025 January. So let's go back, let's go next. So of course there are a lot of use cases, many use cases can apply, and you can as much use cases as you want. So of course in the Gaia-X domain we can, for example, use a catalog only accepting Gaia-X compliant participants. For example, a provider who want to give access only to, for example, certain regions or countries. Or for example, here government given for the driver license, like the one we've seen. Or for example, kind of weird website for whatever reason need to check the age of a user, because they're legally bound to, they have to check the age of the user. So for example, that could be a way to do that without giving any additional personal information. So I'm using ODRL. That must mean that we are interoperable, right? So not necessarily. That's why we had this presentation this morning by Vincent again from the Gaia-X ontology. So if you are describing the same things with the policies and having the same language, that's why we can be interoperable and reusing the same credentials and using for example, the Gaia-X ontology, which afterwards is described in verifiable credentials. Then that means that we speak the same language. And next thing, just an example here for the Gaia-X service offering, which is a service in which here, for example, you have many attributes, but I want to really focus here on the service policy, in which you have to express the policy for your service, which can be expressed in any, of course, policy language. But of course, here we want to focus on the ODRL. So these ODRL policies, of course, seems nice. I guess it's easy to implement, right? Well, I guess not. They're not really easy to implement. There's a lot of potential performance issues. It's because it's very generic and flexible language, which make it very hard to completely cover all the possible cases and be completely generic. Like if we have multiple implementation, they may not perform in the similar way. And of course, so that's why how can we make an ODRL evaluator be predictable and trustworthy? Because that's one. Yeah, go ahead.
I have one additional issue. Just stumbled across a professor from UPM, the Polytechnical University in Madrid, and they are researching, because it's not in ODRL right now, a time ordering of the actions. You remember in the first class diagram there were actions bound to I forgot the rules or something like that. So if you need to evaluate rules which depend on a total order of events, you know, that this has happened and then only that, and not the other way around. This, you cannot express that in ODRL, which from a research perspective is of course a drama, and they are researching that, they are using evaluators. However, with the shortcomings, I would, in order to make a more, let's say, pragmatically approach to ODRL, this is the research edge of ODRL. You cannot express that. But if you look at where access and usage policies automation is today, we have role-based access models, which are kind outside the door. So it's a long way until you will arrive at time-ordered logic to be implemented as ODRL with a suitable evaluating engine. So that wouldn't, this kind of research questions should not and must not tear you away from implementing ODRL. I think the evaluator problem, honestly, is the most critical one, because you want to automate that compliance checking. That some constructs are not implemented right now is usually more a theoretical question, especially if you compare that with existing tools. So if you compare it to the ideal situation, of course it's not there yet, but if you compare to what is available today, then it's a huge step forward.
Yeah, exactly. Completely agree with you, Christoph. Like the evaluator is really the heart of it, and it's really the main focus. And actually, so that's a nice way for the next step. So it's an evaluation engine, and here you can see just a quick way to describe what's a bit the flow of a policy. So, for example, in ODRL, there's the here, and also in the Gaia-X, where they have always the provider, which sets what we call the offer policy. So you're gonna set an offer policy on, for example, on a service, product, so on, and the consumer who would want to request, so a request policy to access such service or product. And there's also the state of the word. So what's the state of the word? It's basically just, for example, like we've seen before, is the driver license expired? To know if it's expired, we need to know what's the date of today. So we need kind of what's the state of the word. And this is important because we're gonna focus on it afterwards. But here, and all these inputs go into the evaluation engine, which either inputs an agreement policy or not. So this is also coming from a work in progress also in the ODRL community group, which is very active, and a lot of people willing to contribute and help improve the specification for ODRL. So it's really nice to have this kind of discussions, and with the, for example, here the ODRL formal semantics, and there's a document, you can see it here at the bottom, which is here, which this example come from. And this specifies actually two cases. So there's the access control scenario, which we'll mostly focus on, and there's the policy monitor. Policy monitor can also be stated as, for example, users control. And for example, here in this example, we have again an assigner, an action. So it's exactly same thing as you've seen before, a target on the document. And here the constraint, we have the left operand a date that must be less than 2018. And you can see here two cases. So for this policy, there's two cases. Either we are on 2017, and in this case, that means that we can access, that we are allowed to, are satisfying actually the constraints. And if we are afterwards, of course, we are not satisfying the constraints, which must mean that the policy is not allowing access. So to get back to verifiable credentials again, why are they actually ideal in this specific use case? It's of course to leverage what's already out there, so they're already a trustworthy claim. They're easy to target and attribute, and be very precise. You can choose whomever want to trust or not. So that's actually the advantages of the decentralized model. No need to reinvent the wheel. Sorry. So we already seen everything that, for example, was in the OpenID presentation by Vincent, which states all these technicalities and protocol for verifiable credentials and how, of course, to verify the signatures, issuers, and so on. That's already defined. No need to do it again. So let's go back, for example, to a use case. And here using Gaia-X credentials, so the new credentials with the LWAR, if you manage to get the LWAR compliance credential. So here we have a policy, again, same thing, a target, action, assigner, assignee. And most important part here we want to focus on is the constraint. So here we have here in the left operand, for example, we are targeting exactly the credential subject, and in the credential subject we are targeting the label level. So this label level must be is any of, so it must be at least level 1. So it must be level 1 or level 2 or level 3. So at least level 1. And this, like mentioned here, so in the credential subject type, targets the label credential. Also another constraint here is you have the left operand. So it's a bit complicated, but just to show that there's JSON path and you can use it as much as you want, and there's libraries available for every language that you can just reuse. So that's also very important that it's easy to implement, and that this property, so the ID of that credential is must be the right operand. So here the consumer, the legal person, must be a compliant credential, and you can see it's the same value as the assignee. So the consumer, basically the consumer must have a legal compliant credential for the legal person. And the request, so again, just to remind, the offer is set by the provider, and here the request comes from the consumer. And here in the request we have a permission, so to use, again, same thing, but assigner, assignee, and that specific kind of a data product ID. The state of the word. So like I mentioned earlier, the state of the word, it can be almost anything, but here, of course, we want to focus on the verifiable credentials for the reason stated previously. And here you can see, if you remember, the label level, which we want to evaluate is SC, which stands for standard compliance, which, if you remember, we wanted at least level 1. And we do have here a credential, for example, for the legal person, the consumer legal person, so it is there. So if we go next, what do you think is going to happen? Yes, access denied. Because we only have the standard compliance, it doesn't actually fit what's been specified here. It must be at least level 1. So we do not have access. So just an example here using the Gaia-X credential. So why not start with a kind of pragmatic approach, and why not start with use cases actually? All we need for this is a quick description of the use case. So just a quick description, some kind of ODRL offer, like the one we've seen before, a request or more, and a state of the word. And of course, expected outcomes, because we want to be able to assert if these outcomes are the one we expected or not. And this kind of, for the people who are familiar with this, can be used as a kind of a test-driven development approach, as you start with the tests, then develop something that fits to those tests. And this way, also, it can help be more in the case, so what we call keep it simple, stupid. So actually develop something that as simple as possible, as simple as it needs to be. It doesn't need to be complex more than it is. Like we can see in a lot of systems that are implemented right now, and a lot of things that are available, is that they are way too complex. And it's very important and essential to foster contribution and collaboration, and to gather as much use cases as possible, to really have the more, of course, use cases, the more we cover, the more it's complete, obviously. And this is also a kind of important, is like the rule, the 80, is just to be able to have the 20% of cases that will cover 80% of the actual practical things we're actually going to use. So here I have a bit of a flow. So the same thing we talked about before. We have the inputs. So here the test package, which include the offer, a request, the verifiable credentials, and an expected output. So this just goes through the test bed, which calls any kind of ODRL evaluator, sends the offer and the request, and see what kind of evaluation, and also the verifiable credentials, and also check the output afterwards, and check if it's the expected one or not. If it's yes, it's of course a pass. Otherwise, it's a fail. And you can see here the code for just a very, very simple example, which is already available in the GitLab, the Gaia-X GitLab. So of course, you need to test it. You cannot just say, okay, it's working in my ecosystem, then that means that's fine. Like there are a lot of implementations everywhere, but we need to actually test it to see if everything works together, if actually is it interoperable or not. So why do we need this? It's already mentioned it, but it actually might also showcase some limitation and misconceptions about the specification that sometimes happens. And it also can show some possible like flaws. Sorry, I think there's like spelling mistake. Flaws when testing with the complex cases. It can also like be a way to issue actually a compliance to evaluators, for evaluators which are actually corresponding to the expected outputs that we want. And this would mean that we have more trust in the software, which would be predictable as the way we would want, and also add an extra layer of trust. For example, if we have more trust in the hardware, which, for example, trusted executed environment, which was mentioned by Evan, I think, yesterday, it could be also a nice step also to add afterwards. And it would also ensure interoperability between, of course, ecosystems. Because if you have a library that works for you, that doesn't mean that it also works with others. So, because like we've seen before, it's like the repo is the ODRL toolbox here. So what's coming? So the most important thing, like I said, is to have more and more use cases and add little by little. Of course, all contributions are welcome. All the code is open source. Also working afterwards on a better validation using Shackle. Having an extensible policy evaluation that would be able to validate those tests and start adding little by little to cover all those use cases. And maybe why not afterwards have a more user-friendly policies generation. And of course, there are also a lot of people, because I'll really discuss with a lot of people on the ecosystem and around ODRL, and there are actually a lot of people which are interested from really many ecosystems. So what's next? Here you probably heard of it, the data space protocol. So the Eclipse DSP, otherwise, which also specifies, you can see also on there's a link below, which specifies a flow, a state machine for the contract negotiation flow. And you can see it here. And afterwards, you can see that we're gonna try to have a kind of simple way to implement it with the evaluation engine. So here you have also a sequence diagram. It's a bit small. you have many steps. We're not going through all the steps, but basically it's a back and forth between the provider and the consumer, and using the engine. It's basically everything we've seen before. It's basically using the engine to see if the offer matches the requests, and just having a back and forth between the provider and the consumer until we reach an agreement or not. And here just to have the rest. And yeah, the important part here also is to have some kind of verification, because if the offer matches the requests, we also need to verify the verifiable credentials if it really matches what we've seen in the agreement. Yep, and afterwards, just a quick shout out to the Gaia-X Academy, and there's a course. It's a really very simple course, and you can see here just a quick example. Does it work? Yes. So here, for example, we have just a case of someone having a provider. So here we are on the provider case. We're choosing to be a landlord here to rent an apartment. And for example, here we just want to add some constraint to this kind of policy. So for example, I don't want my future tenant to sublet my apartment. So here, just generate ODRL. This is just, of course, for the course sake, and it's of course completely static. It's just for the learning stuff, and it's not, of course, automatic. So, and here we're going to the consumer side, and in which we choose here, for example, to be a cheap real estate setup to set up a sweatshop. That's very weird, but let's still check. Yeah. So congrats, it's matched. You may set up your questionable business in this apartment, because in the policy there's nothing stopping you from doing this, but it still does match the policy. So yeah, it's available in the academy, and like you've seen, it's interactive. So it's a kind of an interactive course, so it's a nice way to learn. It's very simple, just a beginning and like an introduction course to policy reasoning and the policy and the ODRL in general. So yeah, you can check it out if you want. And next, thank you, and that's it for our presentation. I would also invite you, if you're interested, to go really more deeper. There's the ODRL community group, which is very active, like I said. There's the formal semantics, which really discuss this in way more detail. And I think also there might even be a physical meeting for ODRL next month with the UPM, like the one you mentioned, Christoph. And that's it for me. Thank you. So do you have any questions?
Yeah, exactly. Are there any questions?
Sorry. Didn't know if I want to take that question or not. I was thinking.
The course.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. I was wondering the state of the world variables.
Yep.
Are there keywords that are defined? Because I saw you have date time, but is there, how would you say, a context with all the keywords like the date time?
No, there's no specific or defined and closed. Like you can really use anything you want in that.
Okay, so it depends on the ecosystem that's running it on the validator.
Yeah, it's just a way to showcase that you can just use anything to evaluate the policy. There's nothing, like it's completely generic. There's nothing stopping you from using pretty much everything. So that's why I just want to focus on the verifiable credentials, yeah.
Are there any libraries that exist to do the ODRL validation, like real big use libraries, not just projects with 40 users or...
for validation?
Yeah, to do all the reasoning.
Oh yeah, because validation might means like you validate like using Shackle, you validating the policy. Yep. So that's using Shackle, but just a complete thing, I don't think it exists. There's a lot of implementations out there, but they're not necessarily complete, and they're targeting sometimes different ecosystems, and they're working in sometimes different ways. There are some libraries and components that are extensible, and you have to extend and use your own functions and this kind of thing. So there's nothing that complete and working out of the box.
Okay, and we'll have to discuss, because I saw similarities with the presentation definition, as you pointed out before, of OpenID for VP, and maybe we can find something.
Yeah, that's definitely a thing, yeah.
I have additional information on that. The EDC, for instance, the Eclipse Data Space, the components connector uses a Java approach. You have to supply a dedicated Java class for every rule. Right now it's implementing, I think, 7, so you have to supply a Java class for every rule. I know that ODRL, the project, I think, is using a graph database and to store the state of the world, and ODRL is then translated into a query, into a Spark star query, so that you can have a very generic. So that would solve the generic reasoning engine. And the third one is, I think the 5-ware connector has an ODRL to Rego translator for some of the constructs, not for all. So for some, so that's quite generic. And Rego, of course, is the open policy agent, a declarative language for reasoning. Yeah. So
yeah, and Fireware also use an API gateway to enforce it.
Yeah, what you, from an enterprise architecture perspective, you would do that reasoning in your API gateway in the DMZ, in the decentralized, in the demilitarized zone, not in the connector somewhere inside your shop floor or something like that. Yeah.
And that's actually great to have many implementations, of course, by many ecosystems and actors. And that's the most important thing, is that all these implementations work together and work the same way. That's why I want to focus more on the test bed part and to be able to showcase that, to check if it's actually interoperable or not.
That's by the way, also being standardized by the Eclipse data space the working group. There is some business rules specification project. Yeah. Any questions in the meantime? Because if not, thanks for the attention.
Yeah,
I think we now. Yep.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you. And if you have any questions, there's here my LinkedIn, and you can feel free to check to contact me or email and ask a question afterwards. Of course, totally open to collaborate on that. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. So yeah, the next question is the Q&A. I think does it start like right away?
So.
Yep. Okay.
5 minutes ago,
5 minutes ago.
Okay.
Perfect. Okay.
Welcome back from a very short break. We have now no program developed or no slides that are presented right now. That would be the time for any question, not just related to what we have presented, not just.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah, the good idea. Yeah.
Want people to come in.
Yeah.
Does it?
And you can ask any from the team who is available. We will not answer, I think, is there a code of conduct? We will not answer discriminative competition law infringement things and all that. Yeah. Yeah, we all know the consequences. Yeah. What's in stock for the next release? For then. That is actually part of this road mapping exercise Klaus has introduced, because there are various, of course, initiatives outside of Gaia-X, and one thing could be, and we have not decided that, to provide better ways how to integrate with those external influences. I mean, we are developing our trust framework further in terms of standardization, so that would most probably also go into the next release.
Yeah, I would like to see sort of a better working together with IDSA, so that you get a better picture how you can combine the two and really have a trust framework from Gaia-X and the data exchange and data space stuff.
Yeah, thanks for the. I repeat the question. The ask was for a better alignment and a way how IDSA stuff, data space protocol, would complement Gaia-X stuff. Actually, we have almost a solution on an organizational, on a people level. This joint data space approach document Ulrich showed. We are in the final things of getting agreement. The agreement is not on the technical side. This is technically, we know that, how we complement, and Yassi has demonstrated that, how we complement, for instance, the states of the data space protocol state machine. But it's more on an organizational level. And I don't want to blame anyone, but it's not on our side. So we will release that in the next, I don't know, First, it will be a strategic document, because this is totally necessary in order to write the technical thing, because otherwise the technical guys are not allowed to do anything on that. Yeah. And then potentially, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know how to best how to make that. It will also go in the roadmap. Yeah. But you are right. Good point.
Thank you. I would be personally interested if, if somebody shows me their verifiable credentials and says they have gone through the GXDCH, can I personally check that? Like, how can I see that? How can I see that they didn't just copy paste anything in there? Yeah. Thank you.
Excellent.
Excellent question. Basically, when you reach out for compliance, the compliance engine will give you a new credential referencing your original credential. So you will have the ID of the original credential, and you will have a checksum, an integrity check, an SRI URI, allowing you to verify that the content that is now provided by the holder is still the same that was validated by the engine. And same, the credential provided by the engine, it's signed, so you know that the data inside is not tampered. That's how you can trust the credentials, and you have this complete chain of trust between, starting from, you have a participant that has a DID, that issued credentials, that provided them to a compliance engine, and that reached compliance. The whole chain is complete like this. And you can yourself take the credentials and submit them to an engine. And you will get the same result. You should get the same result. You should. That's basically what we are doing. I showed this morning quickly the framework page with the digital clearinghouses. They provide a credential, and each time you go on the page, we take these credentials and we submit them to one of the GXDCH, and you can see that they are achieving compliance. So you can verify it yourself if you want.
In the VCJOT specification, you'll have in the lower release, I saw there's normalization, so that's for taggers. In the latest version, you're going to have in the JOT, the JWS header, you're going to have the issuer, which is going to be the DID web of the clearinghouse, and you're going to have the key ID, which is going to point to the verification method in the DID document. Does that answer your question?
That does answer it in theory. But, like, can you just maybe actually share the workflow, like how I would do that?
Something I didn't add is I've talked about the issuer header and the key ID header. The key ID is going to tell you which is the public key in the DID. The DID is controlled by the issuer. So we know that the Aruba, for example, is going to have their DID on their website. Then they're in control of the domain. They have a verification method that specifies a public key. And the VCJOT is going to be signed with the private key that corresponds to that public key. So it means that they're in full control. They're saying, I am Aruba. I have the power of having that key, and I signed with it.
And this one is for V1, but yeah, go ahead, Evan.
Basically, in Darmstadt this year, I hosted a small workshop regarding credentials and everything. And this was to explain how to verify the integrity of a credential that you can retrieve in the CES, but could have been any credential that someone forwards you. And as you can see, basically, it's super easy. You take the credential, you check the integrity, you check the signature, and you can trust. And as you trust Gaia-X as a trust anchor because it's in the compliance document, it's in the trust framework document, well, that's it, you have your chain of trust. But if you need more details on the workflow and everything, feel free to reach out on Slack or via email, and we can do better than that.
Maybe it would be cool to
Just as a comment, maybe it would be great to, like, I have not done the whole academy, so maybe it's already in there, but maybe it would be good if you had that like on the academy or on the website somewhere, so people can have like easier access to that. Okay, maybe that's already done.
That's a very nice comment. And indeed, since 2 or 3 days now, there is a new version of the website online, and we have a developers page where we are explaining a bit the GitLab hierarchy and everything, and we'll make sure to make easier access to this kind of documents. Thanks for the feedback. Anything else? Anyone has a question?
We're having a look, but we can probably show you an easy example what we're explaining with the tools we have, maybe.
Go ahead, Vincent, if you want to.
Java methods, right? You don't have to send this to any external service. You
No. You
just get the public key, and then you.
You are capable of checking, because if you have to ask someone else to validate, it means that you have to verify that you trust them.
Yeah.
So you're going to ask someone else that's going to have to verify that you trust them. So if you can check by yourself, it's the best thing. So this is a little tool that's not official Gaia-X tool, but it's we use it. So if you just click on sign at the bottom.
Yeah, just you can see here the example, the actual content of, for example, of a VC, and we're just gonna sign it into GWT. You can see the result here.
This is maybe gonna end up bad, and we're not gonna be able to show you, but at least we're gonna try, and you can have a good laugh if we fail. So we signed JWT, a VC JOT, with that tool that we created. That tool exposes did. So what we're going to do, if you don't mind, Yasser, if we can just open the did document of the verifiable credential playground, VC JOT, the previous website.
Oh,
Normally, if you just had the well-known...
yeah, no, just looking.
We should have it.
Looking backwards. It's that. No.
And you put you put a backslash. Slash DID.json. Yeah. Second day, end of the day. Okay, so we've got the did, which is hosted on that service. We have the public key JWK. So that one you can just copy the content. Copy the. Oh,
you want to
do it if you want.
Go ahead.
We're gonna try it out. So copy this. So normally, if we copy this, and that's the part where things are gonna get funny. We put it into the public key. This tool, jot.io, is trusted. It's something that's been used everywhere, and you can see that it has been signed by the correct key. So we've just validated that it's indeed the issuer that.
How do you see it? Okay, signature verified. Okay.
Yeah. Okay, that's it. Sorry, we're used to that tool. That's a pretty dirty example we did quickly.
And even if you don't trust the tool, there's libraries available in every possible, I think, language, and you can do it yourself locally. And so you can see here that's so many of them.
As soon as you have access to the VC JOT with the issuer and key ID header with didweb, you're done. And we didn't show you because it's not entirely Gaia-X compliant, the tool we built quickly. It's just a proof of concept for the VC JOT. With a true Gaia-X did, you'll be able to get the certificate, EVSSL certificate. There has been KYB on it. So you have another trusted issuer that's going to validate who the person is. Did that answer your...
In summary, I'd go to GWT, paste in the thing, go to the well-known page, take the public key, the
Yes.
website that it was shown on the JWT site,
Yep.
and then it showed me if it's valid or not.
That's it. You're a VC JOT expert. Great job.
Yeah.
Great training.
Yeah, so that part is for the signature, but you can also, like Vincent said, check the certificate and check it even against the registry. There's an endpoint that's available to be able to check if it's even like a trusted anchor or not.
And you'll see that vcjot.io is a redirection of another domain that we use because it's hosted on a personal server. We just set that up for testing reasons. So anyway, you have it in a nutshell. Any other question?
Yeah, on the registry here you can check, of course.
If that is not the case, no, then thanks a lot for attending until the very last end almost. I think we have a final session in the main theater. And I think one of the last actions Ulrich will announce at the end is the location of next year's Gaia-X Summit 2025. And I hope to be able to welcome all of you, or even more. I mean, we have been much more, of course, in earlier sessions than wherever that may be. Thanks for attending. Thanks for being in the Tech Theater. See you in one of the channels or somewhere else, I'm sure. Thanks.
Thank you.
Questions?